Steve, welcome back to the broadcast. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me. And I just want to let you know that I'm starting my 69th year in business, and not too many people can say that.
No.
And we do flag shirt and banditbottom.com. And why I'm telling you that today is because this morning on the Steve Bannon show, I endorsed Mike Lindell for the chairman of the Republican Party. And Mike was on our Zooms last week, and he answered a lot of questions. We had an election integrity Zoom, and we had a precinct strategy Zoom. And he came on and he explained a lot of things. And Mike is an American hero. He spent $40 million, as you know, on free elections, and we love him. And so this morning, I told everybody if they want to contact me and get their precinct chair and precinct national committee woman and committee man, so they can call him for Mike. They all did that. We had 500 calls. Of course, I couldn't answer them all yet, but by tomorrow I will do that. And if anybody wants to contact me to get their national committee man and committee woman, just go to Steve Stern at sstern1054 AOL or 954-318-6902 or Steve at theflagshirt.com. And we will answer you, and we will give you your state committee man, committee woman. If you want the whole group, we'll be glad to give you those too. So why is that important? Well, if we call and we just do our job and get Mike elected, this is going to change the Republican Party. And why I'm going back toward him is that I do precinctstrategy.com. I want everybody to go to www.precinctstrategy.com. And what is that? That is the Republican Party. Every county and executive county and town committee in the United States has a precinct committee. Some are called county committees, some are called executive committees. In Louisiana, they call parishes. So we have 400,000 slots, and we have between 220 and 240,000 filled out. And Mike answered a lot of questions, and he's a person-to-person guy, as you know, and you work with him. So we love him, and we would like him to be the chair. And how we can do that, we all got to get together and start calling. So this morning we started. We're going to have a national campaign to do this. We have 2 weeks to go. We're going to help him win. So, he is working very hard to do this. One of the things that we had, like I said, we have our weekly or bi-weekly Zoom meetings, and I want everybody to go to Save My Freedom, and you can go to savemyfreedom.us. You can join this Zoom. Next one is going to be the 31st. We need a couple of weeks to work on Mike's campaign, so we're not having one for 2 weeks. And at 3:30 Eastern time, we're going to have an election integrity Zoom. On last week's, we had 154 people on it. Mike got on it. He talked to people, and that's why we love him, because he's person to person. He gets in charge. He takes it over, and he answered a lot of questions that people want to know what he was going to do. Well, he's going to get the people going. He's going to get together with us because, I've called Ronna McDaniels. I've called the vice chair. I called the secretary. I called the treasurer. Nobody returns the call.
Really?
Well, that's kind of silly.
Shocker.
Yeah.
Shocker.
Right. So that's kind of silly because we are the people under them.
Yeah.
And, we're going door to door.
Hey,
we're doing everything.
do you think, put him in the teleprompter here for me so I can see his face. Do you think they would, please, do you think they would return the phone call of, I don't know, let's say AT&T, Pfizer, Comcast, Delta Airlines? You think they return their phone calls, Steve?
Who knows who they call back? They call back only the people that are going to donate.
Oh, wow. Interesting. You want me to let you
Right.
in a little news? I was just saying to Logan this afternoon. I said, Logan, you know why the power players in Washington are opposing Mike Lindell? Because Mike Lindell is a man of the people. He comes from the grassroots. He is the grassroots. He's organized the grassroots. He's supported by the grassroots. He's funded with his My Pillow sales from the grassroots. And guess what they all play to in Washington and the establishment? Big corporations. And some folks here maybe don't know that I have a weekly financial report. Just like I have the nightly worldview report, that's nightly. I have a weekly financial report where I report 30 minutes on financial news. This week's financial report that'll be out, I don't know, when do you think that'll be out, Van? Into the week. You know what I'm reporting in there, Stephen? A
I have no
report
idea.
by the Lexington Herald-Leader. A report filed by the Republican Party of Kentucky, their building fund, last week was registered with the Kentucky Registry of Election Finance, and it listed the $1 million gift from Pfizer. Pfizer, along with 5 other big corporate contributions in the final quarter of 2022, totaling $1.65 trillion for the Republican Party of Kentucky to get their building. And the Lexington Herald-Leader reports that we've got, let's see, 600,000. The GOP, they raked in a jaw-dropping 600,000 during the first 3 quarters of 2022, a whopping $6,000. Then, at the end of the year, here we go, the large corporation stepped in, and you got Metropolitan Life Insurance Company at $300,000, according to the Lexington Herald-Leader. You got Altria Client Services of Richmond, Virginia at $100,000, Comcast Corporation of Philadelphia at $100,000, AT&T of St. Louis $100,000, and Delta Airlines of Atlanta $50,000. So you think the GOP establishment is maybe catering to the people that will cater to the big business versus guys like Mike Lindell that are leading the grassroots?
100%. And when we spoke to Mike about a year ago and you about a year ago about precinct strategy, as soon as he learned about it, he got right on TV and started talking about it. He understood it. Now, I saw President Trump here about last February. We talked to him about precinct strategy. Mike helped me get him. He endorsed it. You endorsed it. Mike endorsed it. And then about 2 days before the election, I saw President Trump, and my main goal was to get him to talk about precinct strategy, getting people involved at his rallies. So we're hoping in this rally coming up here, I guess he's doing it at the end of this month in South Carolina. He promised in front of Liz Harrington, myself, 4 of his secretaries, my wife, my grandson, that he would talk about it. And why is that so important? Well, if we have 200,000 to 220,000 members and we have 60 million voters, there's something wrong, right? Because, we're not getting everybody together. So, Mike, last week on our Zooms, we talked about South Dakota. And you know what happened in South Dakota? They wanted to stop the people from voting.
Right, and they had a convention this weekend. Can you give us an update?
Yep, they got defeated by a tremendous amount. And one of the girls who was on Bannon, I called her right away. Mike started talking about it. We did a national campaign to defeat it. And one of the crazy things was why we have so many rhinos and establishment people. The girl that we had on our Bannon success story team, which we have on our Zoom, ended up as a rhino. And I had no clue. So when I called her and I said, well, can you give me all the, the executive people that are MAGA and this and that, never called me back. I knew that was a problem. So as soon as I spoke to the girls who are the MAGA, they got me 20, 30 people to get onto our Zoom from South Dakota. Now, this is happening all over the country. They're moving the rhinos, the establishment people in Florida. We just had an election for chair. We won about 7 or 8. We won Naples. We won Fort Myers. And the crazy thing in Fort Myers, we won 96-95. So that every vote counts. And what happened when the guy who lost, who was a rhino, he got his people to grab the furniture out of the office, close the office, take the checkbook to Tallahassee. And our guy Thompson, who won, Michael Thompson, he had a couple of days where it was really tough, but he turned it around. And then we won Fort Myers, as I said. We won Orlando. We won Miami. We won Fort Lauderdale. We won Palm Beach, and on and on. We lost a few. And one of the things I was a little sad about, we lost Sarasota. And why Sarasota is so important is that General Flynn became a committee man. And when he told them that he was going to be out of town this particular date, they had the election when he and a number of people were out. So naturally, they lost by 9 votes, and those are 9 or 10 or 11 people that were gone. So you see how even the Republicans work a little bit crazy, and they're not all on board. So a lot is happening in a lot of these states. We picked up a lot of people from Rhode Island, where we never had anybody just recently, because we had this big Zoom on election integrity. Now, what we're going to do on election integrity, so everybody knows, we're going to move the people from election integrity all over the country into the precinct strategy counties. So we're going to have 2 or 3 people from each county on a national basis so we get the job done. When I saw President Trump, he asked me about the election. This was a couple of days, and he was nice enough to endorse General Bodock and Major Malloy. And he said, "What do you think about the election?" Well, I said, "Look, the way things are going now, we're not going to win the election." So I got the bright idea to have this Zoom, where the first Zoom was about a month ago. We had about 40 of the top people. Then we got 60 on the next Zoom. And this last week, we had 145 people on it. And we are getting people together because, nothing's really happened. From 20 to 22, it stayed the same. So we're working toward 2024, where we're going to try to turn this whole thing around. So instead of dwelling on what's happened before, we're going to come up with solutions. So that's one of the things that Mike is helping us with. As you said, one of the counties just turned and going to have paper ballots. So we're all working toward getting rid of the machines. When you do paper ballots, you know what you got. And the election for the chair of the Republican Party is paper ballots. And that's going to happen on the 27th. So we just have a little bit of time to start working on this. And I just want to say again, that Mike is a terrific guy, as we all know. He's given $40 million to help everybody. He's backed a lot of people. Every time I pick up the phone and call one of our precinct committee people, they said Mike is there for us, and that is extremely good. And I know that Mike is not going to take a salary for working for the Republicans, and he's also going to show them how to do it as a businessman. One of the things we've heard is how they squandered money left and right because they don't care what they spend. And now I hear from a lot of people, unless Mike gets in, they're going to give the money directly to the candidates.
And that's why I believe Mike could raise more money from the grassroots than he could from these corporations.
100%. And I say action, action, action. Let's get to it. I know you got a couple other guests coming up, so thank you very much for all this time. And if you have a couple of questions, I'm glad to answer them. We work very hard with the precinct people. But the one thing I want to say, the 200,000 people we have, they don't get the deserve that they get. In other words, I'm here to say thank you, everybody, for all this time that you give. And Mike works with a lot of them, and they do it for free. And we have a lot of retired people like myself. Of course, I'm not all retired. I'm only about 10% retired and 90% working harder than ever before. So if you want to get in, let me say, if you want any information on how to become a precinct committee man, Dan Schultz is the king of it. Go to precinctstrategy.com or call me 954-318-6902 or sstern1054 AOL or steve@theflagshirt.com. And again, I want to thank you for having me on. And again, action, action, action. Let's get to it.
Thank you, Steve. Appreciate it. I can see why you've been in business 69 years. Congratulations.
You got it.
Steve checking in from Precinct Strategy. Joining me before Ivan joins us is Colonel Conrad Reynolds. Colonel, welcome back to the Lindell Report. Appreciate your being with us.
Well, thank you very much for having me. I'm sorry for the lighting. I'm in a car going to a quorum court meeting here in Arkansas, trying to meet some of the JPs in another county.
Okay, good for you. Well, we won't keep you. I think you're the gentleman I interviewed from the desk at the Moment of Truth Summit, right?
Yeah, absolutely. You sure did.
And now you're making news because several people have sent me the article. In fact, I posted it up over at worldviewreport.com. You guys remember that's the aggregated news website, keeps track of the news. Worldviewreport.com. And I put up there, here we go, court votes to remove voting machines from election. Turns to paper ballots and hand counting only over at the Western Journal. And they're talking about a county in Arkansas. That's Cleburne County, right?
That is Cleburne County, yes, sir.
Tell me about it.
Oh, man, this was great. Well, I started an organization. I'm the CEO of the Arkansas Voter Integrity Initiative. And we started this last year, a few months ago, in order to try to take advantage of an Arkansas law that we have where the quorum court can actually vote for paper ballots and get rid of the machine. But the problem we had is, again, they don't know. They don't know what how the machines work. They don't know the voting process. And so you got to explain to them why these machines are really vulnerable. So that's what we've been doing for the last several months, is educating the justices of the peace, the county clerk, the election commissioners, to try to get them on our side to understand that we must get rid of machines We've got to go back to paper ballots, hand marked, hand counted paper ballot. And that takes a one-on-one effort. And that's what we've been doing over the last couple of months. And we actually got Cleveland County to vote to get rid of machines. And that's going to be the first of 75 counties. We've got 74 more to go.
You are quoted in this article over at Western Journal as saying, quote, "These voting machines, which are really just computers, do not follow U.S. or Arkansas election laws, which clearly state that the voters have the right to verify that their votes are properly being represented when entered into the tabulation computer," end quote. Arkansas Voter Integrity Initiative CEO Colonel Conrad Reynolds said in a December 19th press release, quote, "We are told by election officials to check the names on the ballot summary card before we cast it into the tabulator. But the tabulator does not read the printed names on the ballot summary card. It only reads the barcodes. I don't read barcode. So I can't verify that my vote was properly recorded," end quote, Reynolds added. So you're saying the machines are a violation of state law?
That's exactly right. Not only state law, but we think federal law. And we have a lawsuit that we started last month, and we're going to see how it goes. But we are suing the Secretary of State office. We're suing the State Board of Election Commissioners and ES&S because we believe that the machines do not match the letter of the law. And Arkansas law basically just took what federal law says out of the HAVA Act, and they put it in state law. So if we win here in the state of Arkansas, that has implications across the United States. That if we win, then all other states can use what we've done here in Arkansas to get rid of machines there as well.
Absolutely. Where is the new governor of Arkansas on this?
I have not talked to Governor Huckabee Sanders. Don't know for sure, but she's a conservative, and I think that she'll probably be with us. I hope she is.
Yeah. Have you been subpoenaed by any of these voting machine companies? Have you been sued by any of them? Have you received a letter of intimidation by any of them?
Not yet. Haven't heard anything from them. So we'll see what happens. I don't know. But
have you filed your lawsuit against ES&S yet?
Oh yes, it's been filed, and from my understanding, they've already been served, and so we've already got a judge that's been appointed. So we're waiting for a hearing date. But it's going to happen.
And what are you specifically suing for?
This is so black and white. Well, we're suing because under federal law and state law, you have to be able to know that the person you're voting for is on that ballot before you cast that ballot, that it's going to be counted. And if the machine only counts barcode, then there's no way for me to be able to verify that. So that right there, black and white, says no, it's not.
So when do you anticipate this going to trial? Like, I guess you're going to do depositions and whatnot first?
Yep. Well, I'm sure they're going to put in a motion to dismiss. We've got to get past that, of course. I'm not the attorney. We have a great attorney his name is Clint Lancaster. Clint Lancaster worked very close with Justice Gableman up in Wisconsin. He's a very, very savvy attorney here in Arkansas. We're glad to have him. And he is representing my organization, ArkansasVII.org, representing us in this lawsuit. And we think that we've got a really, really good shot at winning. And again, it'll have national implications when we do.
Have you asked in discovery for anything yet? In your lawsuit, have you started discovery and asked for? Have you subpoenaed them for any records or anything yet?
Not yet, because we got to get through that first motion. But not yet, but we think we will. But I will tell you that we've gotten support already, and I really appreciate it from Kerry Lake, from Wendy Rogers, and also President Trump has weighed in on ours as well. Very supportive of it. So we're excited here in Arkansas because we think we can change every county just by the quorum court. But we also have the lawsuit, so we've got two angles that we're going at it.
Excellent. Okay, yeah. So before you go, because I know you got to go to a meeting, this is the county that decided to do this, right?
That's right. Each county has the authority under Arkansas state law to determine if they're going to have machines or not.
And where is Cleburne County?
Cleburne County is approximately 90 miles north of Little Rock. So Little Rock is dead center of the state. Mm-hmm. If you go 90 north, you're going to hit Cleburne County.
Okay. Now, Are you meeting tonight with others to try to help them understand this so they can do this in their county?
Yes, yeah. What I've done is I try to go to the quorum courts.
Wait a minute, let me
where they
just
have
stop right there. You say quorum courts. Explain what that means to the listener.
like this. Is think of it like a city's got a city council and a mayor. Well, the counties that we have a quorum court, which is like a county council, and instead of a mayor, they have a county judge. It's not a judge of law. It's like a senior executive of the county,
Okay.
and they respond for the roads, for the schools, for the sheriff's department pay, and all that. So those are the terminologies we use here in Arkansas, which are a little bit different in other states.
So in other
But
states, they might call it your county commissioners.
right, yeah, you could say that.
Okay.
You could say that.
And you call it what now?
And they're
I'm
sorry.
In Arkansas, you don't call it county commissioners. You call it what?
We call it the quorum court.
The quorum
And they're
court.
made up of the piece, JPs for each of their districts. Every county in the state of Arkansas is divided into districts, and we have between 9 and I think 11 justices of the peace for each county, depending on their population and how they're divided. And they all have a county clerk, and they all have a county judge, and that's how they administer the services to that county.
Excellent. And so you're going around meeting with them individually.
You better believe it. It's one of those things that you just have that face to face and talk with people, because it's slow go, but that's how we win the hearts and minds. Because when you talk about the machines and what they don't know, like for example, most people don't really understand that these machines only count barcodes. They don't understand that. So you got to show them a ballot, and you show them, look, and they go, I never remember seeing that barcode. Right? But once you start talking to them about it, then they understand. The logic kicks in, and they go, you're right, we've got to go to something else. We've got to go to a paper ballot that's not counterfeitable, that you cannot counterfeit it. And that's what we're showing them, that we can do it.
You're working on that technology, right?
Yeah, actually, it's a ballot. The ballot that we're showing them is the ballot that was already developed by Authentic. It's a company out of Dallas, Texas. And it was one that Arizona was going to use, but they couldn't get it through fast enough through their state legislature to approve it. But it's a ballot that's already been designed for Arizona, the paper actually. It's got a watermark. It's got security features that are built into the paper. It's not like the paper of 30 years ago that could be easily copied and go down to Staples and make a bunch of copies. This cannot be copied, cannot be counterfeited. And so that's what we're trying to push here in Arkansas.
And that would be your official ballot, no machines, just that official, non-counterfeitable ballot.
That's correct. That's what would be marked. That's what would be hand counted. And we think that is the solution. That is the only solution. And we can do it all under a camera. You can do it with live stream, so that everybody's assured that this election was transparent, accountable, and fair. And guess what? We'll have more people voting.
Absolutely.
Because this is a nonpartisan thing. This is a patriotic thing, and that's what I'm fighting for. I spent 30 years in the Army as an intelligence officer, and I will tell you, you cannot have a country that loses faith in its election process. And that's why I'm fighting right here in Arkansas to get it right.
And you retired as a full colonel.
I did.
Wow.
Now,
Congratulations.
look, I do it again.
Wow.
And I'm serving my country, my fellow countrymen right now as well.
Wow, you
But
sure are.
I want to say, we're not focusing on past elections. We're not focusing on anything else, because I ran for Congress here in Arkansas, and people want to make it about me. It's not about my election or anything else. It's about the future. It's about fair elections in the future that everybody can trust. That's what it's about.
Absolutely. I don't know why we don't have his website up on the screen, but I want to give out your website a couple times so the good folks of Arkansas and others maybe watching across the country who want to mimic your great work can do that. What's your website again?
It is Arkansas V as in Victor, VII.org. Arkansas VII.org. I'll be glad to talk to anybody. Send me, go to our website. We have an email on there. Our email is arkansasvii@gmail.com. Okay, and you can send me an email. We're trying to raise money. We've got, can I put this in here real quickly? it's all about raising money. This lawsuit alone is probably going to cost us $1 million.
Wow.
I've got some helping me. They're helping me with this lawsuit. But I will tell you, I've got a donor that was said the first $100,000 you get, I'll match. So for anybody who goes under our website and $5, $10, whatever you can do to help us, because if we win it here in Arkansas, it is going to have national implications. So I'm asking people to help us here.
Excellent. ArkansasVII.org.
You got it.
All right.
That's
Now,
exactly
Colonel, thank you for all you're doing. Will you stay in touch? You got my text. Stay in touch. We'd like to get regular updates as this moves through the courts.
We absolutely will.
All
Thank
right.
you so much.
Thank you, Colonel.
Bye-bye.
Colonel
Bye-bye.
Conrad Reynolds, checking in, folks. Check out his website, ArkansasVII.org. All right, and if you want to read that full report, there it is right there. Look at that, folks. WorldviewReport.com. WorldviewReport.com, folks, is a aggregated news website. We spend hours every day putting up news stories we think you need to know. These are the ones, the page starts getting kind of long because we have so much up there, right? But you go back up to the top, you see all the new stories right up at the top that we just added in the last few hours. Okay? So it's an aggregated news site right there. We link to it from frankspeech.com. So if you just go to frankspeech.com, scroll down the page, and there it is. All right? There you go. So that news story, if you click that right there, that'll bring you over here, and there it is. Court votes to remove voting machines from election. That's right out of Arkansas. All about our guest we just had on right there. So you can send that around the country and let people know about it. All right, before we go to Ivan, let me remind you, if you appreciate what we're covering, and we interview and give a platform to people like Steve, and now Colonel Conrad Reynolds, just then. And now we're about to hear from Ivan about the pre-planned January 6th attack on the U.S. Capitol by the deep state. Looks like it was pre-planned by the deep state. If you appreciate that fact, realize, folks, this is a rare broadcast. Because this is a rare network. Mike Lindell and I launched Lindell TV in April of 2021. April of 2021. Here we are in 2023. We're still going at it, folks, thanks to you, because we are brought to you by you. Whenever you go to mypillow.com and make a purchase, a generous percentage of each purchase comes back to keep Lindell TV going and this show, this whole network. So, again, if you appreciate what Lindell TV does, what this show does, what Mike's doing, why don't you go there and use that code L77. Sheets, towels, blankets, pet beds, slippers, sandals, mattresses, mattress toppers, robes, and so much more. It also works at mystore.com, the home for American entrepreneurs. And the Great My Coffee is there. The Great My Coffee is there in light, medium, dark roast, whole bean, already ground, or you can get it in a coffee pod for those little machines, you know. And you can get a subscription so it shows up every 2 weeks or every month at your door. Mystore.com, mypillow.com, promo code L77 to support Mike Lindell and his work. Mike is out tonight, as I said at the beginning of the show, running around the country, flying around the country, meeting with RNC leaders as he runs for the RNC chair right now. Joining me now is Ivan Raiklin. Ivan, welcome back to the Lindell Report. Thanks for joining us.
Hey, Brandon, hopefully the audio is going to be okay. I'm just wrapping up from Richmond, Virginia. Had dinner with some of the key patriots down here. Now heading back up to Northern Virginia. How's the audio?
The audio's fine. Did you actually set up a light to light your face up?
Yeah, I may have. Why, does it look like that?
No, it's good thinking. That's what they do in Hollywood movies. And I'm like, surely he doesn't have a light in his car that lights his face up automatically. So I'm thinking that's pretty good thinking. Otherwise, we wouldn't be able to see you.
Right now, you're on my phone.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're on my phone here with the video, and then underneath the phone, I have the iPad facing towards me with the flashlight behind it. So
Perfect
just
idea.
like MacGyver, I make do with what I have.
Yeah.
When I have it.
Yeah, perfect. Otherwise, we would not see your face. We would only be hearing you. Excellent. Good thinking, Ivan. All right. Thank you for making time for us. Before we go into J6 being a pre-planned operation by the deep state, what were you doing down in Richmond at the Capitol?
Yeah, so thanks to you, I launched my program, my daily broadcast, the Raiklin Report. Thank you, Mr. Brandon
You're
Howes.
welcome.
That intro was definitely strong. And I was down there essentially, it's called Lobby Day. Every year on Martin Luther King Jr.'s, Martin Luther King Jr. Day, the Richmond State Senate and State House host what's called Lobby Day. where you have access to, and I was not lobbying. I was just out there exercising my First Amendment as a private citizen. I want to make sure that that's clear. And I was interacting with different representatives to essentially make sure that they were doing what they said that they were going to do, meaning, putting forth bills that are going to be put forth starting tomorrow on election integrity, such as State Senator Amanda Chase did today. She showed me 6 of her bills. Pretty interesting. I might be coming back down tomorrow in order to help essentially convince those on the committee to go ahead and support them. And then also Delegate John McGuire is putting forth not only election integrity bill, but some other bills that are definitely focused on regaining our rights as patriots to push back against the rhinos, the Americans in name only, and then the radical domestic terrorist left.
Excellent.
So that was why I was there. And then there was a rally that was on medical freedom. And you had folks like Matt Strickland, who is running for state senate in Virginia, but also is the guy that owns a restaurant in Fredericksburg, Virginia, which I'll be passing through in probably about 30 to 40 minutes. Maybe I'll stop there and grab some dessert at his restaurant called Gore Melts. And that is the guy that you probably saw went viral a few weeks ago on Facebook when he was confronted by state police and they seized his alcohol in order to enforce the CCP 19 mandates from 2 years ago. And then luckily he recorded it. So there was massive political pushback and forcing the government, the Attorney General, another weak-kneed rhino, which is obviously slightly better than the commie left, but nonetheless just weak. And they were forced into essentially reinstating his license, his liquor license, so that his business could reopen.
Excellent.
So he was there. I mean, I spoke with those folks. I think it was a decent debut. Maybe the audio wasn't perfect because I was out there, on the street, but maybe next time around I'll have a lavalier.
Well, you did great. You did great. Let me get to this timeline. Now, you have done a deep dive on J6. And I don't know, the Gateway...
Oh, I've done hundreds, if not thousands of hours on it.
The Gateway Pundit had an article today quoting somebody, I don't know if they were being under oath or what, talking about the very violent people that were there that led them to believe, I guess, from the article that this was definitely pre-planned by these characters. Do you know anything about that report, A? And B, you can go a lot deeper than that, right?
Yeah, so before I go into the deep dive, I want to give folks a sense of credibility and what sources I have used to come up with what my final analysis is. So since January 6th, I've been investigating what actually occurred on January 6th, and that includes different bodies of work. Put together that documentary that aired on Frank's speech was it January 6th it launched, called We the Patriots, which I interviewed quite a few people to get a sense of what was going on in and around January 6th. Not only that, but I attended the rally on January 5th in Freedom Plaza. I was in the VIP tent, kind of like observing from there. I was at the Ellipse on January 6th, so I got a kind of sense of what was going on there. And then I also started to take a look at all the different cases that occurred since then. So I've sat in and listened in and observed on the Oath Keepers trial. I've also been in an opening arguments for the Proud Boys, and then all these other major trials. In addition, I read the 850-page report by the Mike Pence J6 cover-up committee. I've read a good portion of the transcripts of those that were testifying. I observed all the J6 cover-up committee hearings. I've also read the Republican prebuttal, 150 pages, that talks about everyone that they interacted with. I've also watched the testimony by the House Sergeant at Arms, Senate Sergeant at Arms, the Chief of Metropolitan Police Department, Conti, and then more recently, like we discussed a few days ago, I also just finally, it was yesterday, finished in its totality the book written by the Chief of U.S. Capitol Police on his perspective on the entire thing. So I've looked at it from not only the government's perspective on both sides of the political equation, but also the defendants and those on the Capitol Police Board that have insight on what happened. And everything still stays the same in terms of this. My hypothesis and assessment and conclusion stays the same, only with more supporting evidence to it. And it is as follows. What happened on January 6th was a facilitated, unlawful entry into the Capitol. You can call it also an entrapment that was orchestrated by Nancy Pelosi and executed and implemented by her Sergeant at Arms, Paul Irving, at the time. Her daughter on the inside of the Capitol, Alexandra, was quote unquote recording a documentary. So she was on the inside helping coordinate. Her son-in-law, Michael Pelosi Voss, was on the outside of the Capitol. We've seen pictures of him with the guy with the horns. Also having meetings with John Sullivan the day prior at the W Hotel. John Sullivan being the he also Jamie Fleet is a staffer of Nancy Pelosi, and then also Nancy Pelosi's chief of staff. Those are the key players that I believe interacted with John Sullivan and Ray Epps. So when Ray Epps was under testimony and he was asked about, did he work or communicate with the FBI or any other law enforcement, his response was no. So if we assume that that is a truthful response, let's just for a moment assume that it is, it still doesn't mean he's lying about interacting with Nancy Pelosi's daughter or her son-in-law, or in some way, shape, or form, as a cutout, or even directly with Nancy Pelosi or her staff. So that is still yet to be answered. And so my bottom line assessment is that the next steps that need to take place within the House under Kevin McCarthy, and if he doesn't do it, then he needs to be vacated by Matt Gaetz or Bob Good or anybody else, is that there must be an investigation, release of the 14,000 hours, a deep dive look into Nancy Pelosi, her staff at the time, Paul Irving, the former Sergeant at Arms, John Sullivan, Ray Epps, all these people need to come in, and I would be more than happy to provide the list of questions that need to be asked to be able to ensure that they're not able to circumvent with truthful answers that won't get to their complicity in January 6th.
So
and I can go into deeper analysis of the evidence to support that.
Absolutely, keep going. I want to hear deeper evidence.
Okay, so on January 5th, to understand what happened, I think for Nancy Pelosi to execute this, you need to understand the totality and remind everybody of what happened on what was going on politically on the 5th of January. Because I think that the plan was probably completed, concocted, or solidified on January 5th. Because up until January 5th, there was discussion about objections and this and that, but it didn't really come to an apex, if you will, of where there would possibly be enough members of the House and Senate to object until January 5th, when we saw 147 members of the House, and growing by the minute by, I think, midday of January 5th, and then, or even the morning of January 5th, and then 12 senators had publicly all stated that they were going to object. And those numbers were increasing by the minute. So if you're following, I don't know, my Twitter account at that time, which at that point had been retweeted by President Trump, I believe at least 3 times, and I would suspect that Nancy Pelosi and her staff were consuming what President Trump was putting out on his social media, which happened to also include some of my posts. And in there, I had kind of articulated what would happen in the event that, the objections would happen. And by the way, I was communicating with numerous members of the House to convince them that all they had to agree with in order to object was that the elections in those states were conducted in a manner not according to that state's election law, which triggered a constitutional Article 2 violation, which they were sworn to uphold and defend. So once we got past that point, a lot of people were on board with objecting. So on January 5th, there's several people that have reached out on Telegram and other platforms that basically said that they were there on the 5th. And the reason why they reached out was because I was putting together this documentary. And they essentially said that they saw at noon at the W Hotel in Washington, D.C. on the 5th. Remember, on the 5th, the day prior, they saw John Sullivan, the Black Lives Matter Antifa Utah member that was part of that inner breach team on the following day. He was meeting with Michael Voss, who happens to be Nancy Pelosi's son-in-law. Okay? It'd be interesting to question both of them.
Is there any way you could put anything you could do to bring, you're a constitutional attorney, any way for you to bring a lawsuit so you could get Pelosi and her son-in-law and daughter under deposition?
Well, I think that's a great question. So one way to do that is to essentially showcase that Mike Pence and Nancy Pelosi on the following day violated the 12th Amendment.
Is that
But as it
is
applies,
that when they fist bumped each other?
yep, that was the day that they fist bumped each other. But let's go back to understand the 6th. You got to understand the 5th. And I've done numerous podcasts going into deep dive with the map to support it and the jurisdictional hook of the U.S. Capitol Police. Bottom line is, on the 5th, you had those two meeting. It'd be interesting to find out what exactly they were talking about. One way to find out is to bring them in and have them under oath with this new committee that Jim Jordan has created, or even the judiciary to look in, or even the House Administration Committee to take a look at what they were discussing to get into the real story of January 6th. And then later that afternoon and evening, remember how we saw John Sullivan, who had just a few hours prior had met with Ray Epps, was standing right next to Ray Epps. John Sullivan and Ray Epps were at Freedom Plaza the evening when Ray Epps was saying, tomorrow we attack the Capitol. Keep in mind, on the 5th, the mayor of D.C. refused any executive branch support for the following day without her permission. Was there coordination between her and Nancy Pelosi for that to happen? Because I think in order for her plan to play out on the 6th, they had to keep as low a number of law enforcement around the Capitol to make it as simple as possible under her full control, the Capitol, without too many people knowing about it.
Let me stop you right there.
Covert action on
the
Capitol ground.
Let me stop you right there, because if I think the key word there was not under her control. If there was law enforcement that was not under her control, those law enforcement, National Guard, whatever, they would step in and they would have
stopped it. Full 100%.
And I'm not talking about stopping patriots, because I don't think there were a lot of patriots doing that. We're talking about stopping the provocateurs that were wearing the MAGA gear and doing this, that were part of the deep state or tapped by the deep state.
That would have stopped the provocateurs that I argue Nancy Pelosi was the one that made sure we're there to make it happen. It was as though those provocateurs worked directly for the House Sergeant at Arms. Paul Irving is my argument. That reports directly to Nancy Pelosi. Remember that the joint session was in the House, on the House side of it. The jurisdictional component within the Capitol Police Board, and this is so beautifully written and laid out by this new book by Chief Sun. And it replicates all the research that I've done in terms of the jurisdiction, the statutes as it applies to the Capitol Police Board. There are 4 members of the Capitol Police Board: the House Sergeant at Arms, the Senate Sergeant at Arms, and the architect of the Capitol, also known, they use the acronym AOC, the real AOC, architect of the Capitol. Those are the 3 voting members. And then there's 1 non-voting member, which only provides recommendations, and that's the Capitol Police Chief, Stephen Sun, the guy that wrote the book. So, going back to what you just said, not under her control. Under her control, 100% is the politically appointed Chief Sun, Paul Irving. For context, Paul Irving, prior to that, served under Paul Ryan as Speaker of the House. Prior to that, served under John Boehner. The reason why I mention that is because we saw later on that John Boehner and Paul Ryan were out campaigning for Lizzie Cheney for her to win her election. Remember? That occurred in the primary. So, this same Paul Irving is totally under the control of Nancy Pelosi, because she was appointed by her. He was appointed by her. And so, if you allow the Capitol Police Chief to do their job, and if they knew exactly what was going on, and if you didn't place pipe bomb at the DNC and RNC, diverting half the Capitol Police, you would have had more support and effort to block the provocateurs from trespassing into the Capitol and facilitating the unlawful entry and instigating the patriots from getting in.
Okay,
so
big news right there. Got to stop you right there, because I don't want to let that go by. You're saying the planting of the explosives was a diversionary tactic to take about half of the Capitol Police off the Capitol grounds, because I think some of those guys would have just done what was in their oath.
That was, if you look at the time, I see all my research into the Capitol Police, particularly the chief, is that he was a nonpartisan actor trying to defend the Capitol. And while he, like we talked about before, he probably, most police that have been in the system for a while, they're going to lean right of center. Got it. But he was probably the most nonpartisan of anybody in this flow that was just trying to defend the Capitol. And so when you read his book, his heart bleeds and it pains him for what happened on the 6th. And obviously there were some police officers hurt. And so he has that perspective. But he was not, I don't think he was in on any of it and did not know that this facilitated unlawful entry was going on, nor could he have. Because when he requested additional support, think of it from his perspective, he has to defend the Capitol. On January 3rd, he requested the Capitol Police Board for additional support because he didn't get intelligence that should have been provided to him by his intelligence person, who apparently seems to be loyal to Pelosi because she was lifted up to be the acting Capitol Police Chief. I mean, there's all these different relationships that lead to foul play. He was trying to defend the Capitol. At 5 or 10 minutes before 1 p.m. is when it was announced that there was pipe bombs there at the DNC. And so then he has to react and send some of his police force down there, thus making vulnerable the entire Capitol complex. You got to remember that the DNC and the RNC fall within the broader jurisdiction of the U.S. Capitol Police. Not only the Capitol grounds where it's like the House and Senate, it's an extended jurisdiction that goes south down to the National Stadium, which is way more south than the DNC and the RNC occur. It's in statute where they have the responsibility. So he had to deploy his law enforcement capability. Thus, remember, you don't have National Guard because Nancy Pelosi won't authorize it and request it, even though Capitol Police Chief was requesting it. You don't have any support from the D.C. mayor because they're not there until Nancy Pelosi authorizes it. Literally, Nancy Pelosi has to approve any law enforcement external to her own sergeant at arms or Capitol Police to be on the House side of the Capitol complex. Is she has to request it. The first thing that has to happen, she has to request it, and then it has to be approved. If anybody deploys their assets without her request, that would be considered a coup. So when Nancy and Mike Pence and the J6 cover-up committee try to lay blame on Trump for saying he never deployed the National Guard, or for even the Department of Defense to deploy the National Guard, they can't do that without a specific request by the Speaker of the House. She never gave it until after the breach occurred and the content was created to make the frame that they already probably pre-approved with the mainstream media to report that it was an insurrection. Meanwhile, they created the entire facade, and unfortunately, Chief of Capitol Police and the Capitol Police officers were victims of, along with the rest of the country, in this operation. And I want anybody to come out, particularly Nancy Pelosi, her staff, her family members, daughter and son-in-law, to come out and prove me wrong. And I would love to bring them on your show, Brandon. Have Mike Lindell invite them. I'm available anytime to go even into further detail. But bottom line, using all the sources that I just mentioned, that's really the story, because I looked at the timeline on the 5th from my own personal experience of being at Freedom Plaza, on the 6th, and then also all the documents that I read through, the books, the interviews that I've done for the documentary, everything. All roads lead to Nancy Pelosi in terms of setting it up, because they had to do this in order to stop the objections from taking place and the whole world to see the evidence of an illegally certified election. That was their only option at that point, because they knew that there was going to potentially be enough electoral objections to potentially have a re-election for President Trump. Because I was putting it out there on Twitter that, and I was on podcast explaining, hey, this is how the joint session should take place. You have Arizona come up, you have an objection period, the Senate goes to their chambers, the House remains, and then they hold a vote. And I argue that Kevin McCarthy should vote one state, one vote on the objection, because the Electoral Count Act says nothing about how to vote, and only the 12th Amendment says that you vote in a contingent election, one state, one vote. So the discretion was there for the majority leader. Speaker of the House would have a majority for it at the time, Pelosi, but under a one state, one vote construct, which gave the Republicans the majority. And then when they came back into the joint session, the Kevin McCarthy would have said, or actually, Mike Pence, as the presiding officer, would have come back and asked, what's the vote on Arizona for the objection? Nancy Pelosi would have stood up and said it doesn't pass because whatever it was, 220 something, don't allow that objection to continue. And then Kevin McCarthy should have stood up and said, point of order, we're actually voting one state, one vote. And it's actually 27 to 20 to 3 at the time, the 3 states tied up. That vote to sustain the objection on Arizona, meaning not allowing those electoral votes to be counted in the tally. And then it would have been up to the presiding officer, Mike Pence, to make the determination on which of those 2 types of votes would have been allowed to be solidified. And I was arguing that it was up to Mike Pence, to look over to the House Sergeant at Arms, the House parliamentarian, get their advice, look over to the Senate parliamentarian, get their advice, and then after hearing both sides are out, to rule as follows. Hey, House parliamentarian, you're binding for every single time other than a joint session of which I'm presiding officer. I thank you for advising me. Noted. And then he would look over to the Senate Sergeant at Arms and pronounce that the Senate Sergeant at Arms is only binding when in Senate. Since we're in the House chambers, you are not binding either. And so it's up to me as presiding officer. Mike Pence should have ruled that the only guidance as it applies to the vote rests in the 12th Amendment, where it says one state, one vote. And he could have used that as his legal basis to then accept Kevin McCarthy's one state, one vote objection, thus declining the electoral votes from Arizona and then multiplying that style of voting to Georgia, Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Nevada, thus giving nobody 270 electoral votes. And then what? A full style contingent election, which would have seen us with a re-election of President Trump. And that is why Nancy Pelosi had to stop that from happening with this bold covert action, facilitated entry into the Capitol.
Because after that, we saw
6th.
because after that we saw everybody lost their stomach. They all lost their stomach. Absolutely. They all lost their will to fight. Now let me ask you clarify something. You said that once that happened, full stop, what would have happened then? We would have had another election, or would it just been voting at the House of Representatives level without those swing states? No, because you said nobody got 270. So how would it have been decided?
So, yeah. In the 12th Amendment, if no one gets the majority of the electoral vote, the House votes one state, one vote to determine who the president would be, and the Senate votes one person, one vote on who the vice president would be. So at that time, the states represent, again, using that same construct that I just talked about for the objections, they would have voted for Trump if everyone voted by party. And in the Senate, at that time, remember, this is January 6th, not January 20th. So at that time, the majority was still Republican, thus re-electing Mike Pence.
Wow.
That's what would have happened on January 6th. And I articulated this, and because I think there was a significant enough following of my work based on the retweets of President Trump and the podcast, just based on the sheer number of views, I had 200 million impressions on Twitter in December of 2020. So I think it's a strong assumption to make that Nancy Pelosi staff, right? Those people probably observed. I mean, come on. They were following not what Ivan was doing. They were following what Trump was putting out. And when he's putting out my arguments on some of these things, it's probably safe to say that they were probably coming up with their contingency plan. And I suspect that that's what they came up with. And unfortunately, I didn't suspect it at first, right? They totally outmaneuvered us. But as we started researching it, as I started looking into it, this is the only logical explanation on what happened. And that's why you saw Ray Epps and John Sullivan being taken off of the FBI's most wanted list, because Nancy Pelosi and her sergeant at arms pulled them off of the criminal referral list once the FBI reached out.
Because they would have spilled the beans.
100%.
Wow. Ivan
That's your
Raikland.
story, Brandon.
IvanRaikland.substack.com. IvanRaikland.substack.com. Great analysis, even while he's going down the interstate, headed back to Northern Virginia from Richmond. Thank you, Ivan.
Thank you, Brandon. Appreciate the time again.
That's the Lindell Report, folks. Remember, support Mike's work. L77 at MyPillow.com, and keep shows like this coming your way. Thanks for watching. Take care. You're watching Lindell TV.
Hello, I'm Mike Lindell, and I'm excited to bring you my Giza Dream bed sheets for the best offer ever. We're all experiencing rising prices, but I was able to secure a limited amount of Giza cotton for a great price, and I'm passing those savings directly onto you. You can get my Giza Dream bed sheets for as low as $29.98 with your promo code. They're the most luxurious sheets ever, made with the world's best cotton. It's grown only in a region between the Sahara Desert, the Mediterranean Sea, and the Nile River. I know my sheets are perfect for you, and I'm extending my 60-day money-back guarantee for Christmas until March 1st, 2023, making them the perfect gifts for your friends, your family, and everyone you know. So go to MyPillow.com or call the number on your screen. Use your promo code to save 50% on my Giza Dream bed sheets. That's as low as $29.98. Quantities are extremely limited at these amazing prices, so please order now.
Tonight on the Worldview Report, a rugby player in England, a woman in Las Vegas, and a 2-year-old girl in New Hampshire are among those in our Died Suddenly report tonight. That's just a small sampling of the many who are lost each day in what's shaping up to be a global vaccine genocide. Bush-era Secretary of State Condoleezza Rice comes to the defense of politicians shoveling billions to Ukraine, saying it's the right thing to do. We have the testimony of a 17-year-old girl who was traumatized by a transgendered man pretending to be a woman, flashing his private parts in front of her at a YMCA facility. China introduces its first genetically modified racehorse, and Illinois becomes the 9th state to ban so-called assault weapons. But the state's Marxist governor is encountering stiff resistance from sheriffs who say they refuse to enforce the ban. All these stories and more as the world